I'm author Mark Muncy,
I'm author Erika Lance.
and this is Eerie Travels. Greetings, travelers.
Greetings, travelers.
Oh
Oh
man, yeah,
Yeah.
we're getting into it. This
We're-
is great.
it's well, we're
It
getting
is-
to it too because we're for the first time, both of us recording in your
in
mountain
my
hut,
my haunted house.
your
Yes.
haunted house with
yes.
your guest that's here on this podcast.
Yeah,
with
yeah,
us.
the silent visitor. So hopefully, if you guys are listening to this, we don't get too many EVPs. Yeah, who knows though? So, especially since we are going to be talking for spooky season.
Spooky season.
We are wonderfully talking some of our favorite Halloween books.
Yes,
today.
and so listeners, if you are not an avid reader, which we hope everybody is, because the fact is there's so much that can be contained in books. And if you don't like actually reading, get audiobooks.
Yeah.
Seriously, because believe it or not, you'll find that some of this literature we're talking about is way, way more deep and entrenched of a story than sometimes the movies or TV shows that some of these are based on that you find. And
Yep.
some of them are movies, so we'll comment on that if there is a movie version of the book
Yeah.
that we love.
And some of these should be movies that aren't,
Yes.
because it's sad. Some of these things are difficult to translate to film, and and that's and they all sometimes lose a little something, but sometimes they gain a little something.
And
in
we'll
the transition.
talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
I will say this though, for travelers, I think we should start with the fact that if you've been following along with us, I have been reading one of Mark's favorite books of all time, which is by Robert Zelazny.
Roger Zelazny.
Roger. I keep
You
calling him
keep calling
Robert.
Robert. I don't know, but the late great Roger Zelazny, and with illustrations by Gahan Wilson. Gahan Wilson. So
Yes. And
I keep on calling him Graham. So because
that's okay. We can mess up the names. I
Yeah.
put it correctly. So I'm going to read the blurb for the back of this
Yes.
book, and it is called A Night in the Lonesome October. So all is not what it seems. In the murky London gloom, a knife-wielding gentleman named Jack prowls the midnight streets with his faithful watchdog Snuff, gathering together the grisly ingredients they will need for an upcoming and ancient and unearthly rite. For soon, the death of the moon, black magic, will summon the elder gods back into the world, and all manner of players, both human and undead, are preparing to participate. Some have come to the open gates, some have come to slam them shut, and now the dread night approaches, so let the games begin. Ooh, I got chills. So when this airs, I will be on day 24. You read a chapter a day. So if you want to, we're going to include a link in the show notes for this book. You can catch up with me. It's not very, very long. There is a wonderful audio version of the book, which
read by the author, and then there's another one read by another, but get the one read by the author.
Get the one read by the author. We will put it in the show notes so you guys can follow along with it. But I have to say what's brilliant about this book, and I'm loving it, because it's actually told by Snuff. Snuff is the one basically telling us this story, which is the dog, the watchdog. And the watchdog has very specific duties, but there are a lot of other animal familiars in this. And it's mainly told from their perspective about their masters and their partners in this. So it is super exciting. What do you want to say about this? Because you've been like almost proselytizing.
This is one I give out every Halloween to friends and family, because people start picking it up in early October, and by then it's gone. It's usually goes out of print fairly often and regularly, because it's Roger Zelazny's no longer with us. The Amber estate is going through legal battles and stuff. Recently, Stephen Colbert just bought the rights to everything, so we'll see if that means this. But Penguin Publishing has done a new edition of this, but it's back ordered because it's Halloween and they can't print enough. And with all the books, kind of on back order everywhere, this is kind of a thing. So you can find them used if I haven't snatched them up.
I was going to say, Mark, if I find them used, it's in Mark's house. Don't come here. But we'll put a link, because there is a UK version that has all of the drawings. I'm saying it
Yeah,
correctly.
the original
Drawings.
illustrations and
Yeah.
all that, and it's got a brand new cover, and it's still the same book and everything, and it's available from Canada and UK, and you can get it shipped US pretty cheap.
Amazon is the source. It gets there. If you're a Prime member, it comes for free. You're good.
You'll still be getting it. But it's an amazing story, and I love. It's the Bakshi movie that needs to be made. It's if you could go back in time to the 70s, 80s, and have Ralph Bakshi animate this, it would be one of the greatest movies of all time.
And we can all thank Mark for making an obscure reference. A lot of our listeners are like, "What the hell are you
Ralph
talking about?"
Bakshi. He created Wizards, and he did the animated Lord of the Rings movies back in the day. He also did Barrett, one of our favorites, which is the Last Unicorn. Which is Carrie's favorite. Oh my gosh. So,
which could be considered a horror story.
It is. It's terrifying in its own.
We'll put a link in the notes,
but
so you can look
one of the reasons we also brought this up was our good friend Jonathan Mayberry.
Yes, Jonathan Mayberry
come out with an edited collection called Weird Tales, which is the stories from the Weird Tales magazine, which originally printed some of the names Robert E. Howard, who created Conan, and Solomon Kane, H.P. Lovecraft, but then he's added some newer people like this guy named R.L. Stine that I'm sure you all know, Richard Matheson, who's like one of my favorites, did the great I Am Legend, another classic book. Isaac Asimov.
That Stephen King did the I Am Legend.
I know, but no,
I know. I even had that confused for the longest time. So sorry.
It's like how if anybody does a silly song, they always say, "Oh, Weird Al recorded that." No, if there's a swear word in it, Weird Al never touched it.
Yeah.
That was back in the early days of Napster. I remember you would always see this song by Weird Al, and you're like, he didn't record that. No, he didn't. But not that I ever used Napster. But our good friend Al Going Back. Al Going Back contributed to this, and it's an amazing collection, and it's a huge hardcover, and
it is called
Weird Tales: 100 Years of Weird, and it's literally $30.
It's $30, and it's a beautiful book. It's got amazing short stories, so we're gonna highly, literary fans, we're gonna highly recommend it to go out and get it. And of course, shout out to Mr. Mayberry, whom we adore. So,
yep. So definitely the links to all these will be in.
Yes, it's going to be an epic link session.
And get your Amazon cards ready for Prime Day, gang. So
yeah,
if you don't get them for Halloween, get them for next year. Buy them early, and start your reading list early. So Erika, you have a list of some of ones your favorites.
I have a list, and you went and grabbed all of yours, which
I grabbed all mine because I didn't need a list because mine are all right here.
So
handy. So
I am going to start with my number 5 because we like to start with our number 5s.
Yep.
My number 5 actually, believe it or not, ironically, not coordinated, ties in to Mr. Mayberry.
Oh.
So my number 5 is a collection of short stories. It was made into a Netflix series, so we're going to discuss that a little bit, but it is called The V Wars.
Oh, yes.
Now, Jonathan Mayberry put this short story collection together. He has the origin story of the first recorded vampire incident in there that has to do with, which I love, with a barista in New York that is an actor, right? And that's where it starts. But all of these short stories, what's amazing is he's got some fantastic other authors, but the V Wars are vampire wars. That's what it's about. But the premise of this book, and I promise we're not going to do giveaways of things like that, but the premise of this book is that the ice caps are melting. So viruses that existed and were in gene trains. So if you came from a certain area, like there's a Scandinavian version of the vampire, there's a Romanian version of the vampire, and all of the vampires have different skills and abilities, and different people who came in contact with these melting ice caps that release these, I want to say viruses that triggered latent genes to turn some people into vampires. And so each of these stories are about that. And there's one that is my favorite. I've even talked to Jonathan about it. It was not his, but I love him and I love his stories. But the one of my favorite has to do with one that's Indian based, and she turns into kind of a rattlesnake. Basically, her hair gets the snake scales, like in the light, it shimmers snake scales, and she gets the two protruding fangs are filled with venom, like snake venom, right? Poison. So it's interesting because she ends up I'm not gonna give away the ends up.
No.
But her story is phenomenal. But all of the stories, because there's one that goes into the romance of the Romanian vampires. And
very nice.
Here's a fun story. I'm gonna give a little thing away. They have to feed off kin.
Oh yeah. That's the Striga.
Yeah.
So,
and the problem is, like, you will run out of family after a while. You're eating them. So you have to then make new family. Anyway, it's just phenomenal how these stories are weaved together, and it's told from the perspective of the origin and then trying to contain it at different stages, including trying to contain the barista. So Jonathan Mayberry, V Wars, my number 5, absolutely.
What's amazing about that is that Indian one, I've done massive study on vampires back in the early days, and one of my favorite legends is the Bhima Gupta, and that is the Indian vampire, and they are known to turn into snakes and bite the udders of cows to make the milk sour, and which is very against Hinduism and stuff, because the cows are sacred and all that. It's very cool. It's there, how we have the ones attack our horses and our livestock, the werewolves eat our livestock. It's the same thing, but over there it's snakes. I love that.
And what's interesting is, so they made this into a Netflix series that had Ian Somerhalder, who is a good friend of Jonathan Mayberry. And what happened is the COVID happened and it stopped production. So from my understanding, they're going to be redoing this, but more the way the story should have been told, not the way the story was told. It wasn't bad. It's a very interesting season. If you get a chance, I would.
It was a serialized version of the more young adult aspects, which is not the way that series should have went.
And it was this Jonathan's tale told not as much as the other ones that should have been included, because they're vital for this stories to kind of make sense together. So anyway, so shout out. That is my number 5. What about you?
My number 5 is actually a nonfiction, which is surprising.
Oh, what?
And is written by a friend, and it was written by our wonderful friend Chris Kullstrom, and it is called Drawn to the Dark. And what Chris did was, she took a year off of her life and traveled the world, going to all these places for their basic equivalent of Halloween.
Oh wow!
So she goes to Krampusnacht on Bald Mountain. She does the Egyptian Day of the Dead in Egypt. And she does just all these amazing places. She goes to Dante's Inferno Museum, and it's in Milan, and it's how she did the travels. It's filled with a few photos from the events, but that's not the point. It's the interviews with the people and her experiences in doing it. She basically slept on couches and backpacked through the places and got to stay with the people running the haunts. She does a haunt, a zombie walk. She even goes to a zombie school on how to be a zombie for the zombie walk, and for a zombie paintball event over in the UK. And it's pretty epic, just lots of fun. And it has a little personal tie, because the last chapter was she came to a local haunt in Florida called Hellview Cemetery. And that's the Halloween chapter, is how to do a haunt in Halloween. And so for her American Halloween was was
Oh,
Halloween
so look at the
Cemetery.
picture.
And-
I see a
yeah.
particular friend of mine.
Yeah,
that I may
and
be
my 2
talking to.
kids, you know, and
Yeah.
one who may be producing this very podcast. So
Producing this podcast.
yeah,
show?
yeah.
Hey,
And so it's a lot of fun. It's just one of those, if you really want to get into the spirit of Halloween around the world, you do this one. So
I love it. I love it. That is
Yep.
awesome. Okay, let's do our number 4 before
number
the
4
break.
before we do the breaks. Yeah.
Number 4.
All
Coming
right.
in at number 4 for me
Mm.
is another fun shout out, which is Krotoa.
Oh, Crota.
Crota. I always
Crota.
say it wrong.
Krotoa.
I'll
Krotoa
say
is
that.
you're going back to your Al going back Crota. Yes.
So
Oh,
I did not sleep. And you warned me of this.
I
So,
told you.
yes, I have been fortunate to Al going back was on my other podcast, Drinking with Authors, but I've run into him several times at conventions. One of the most wonderful human beings.
He's
His
amazing.
wife is wonderful.
Oh yeah,
just,
they're just great people.
just great. And he is one of those authors that I love because he really loves his readers like we do.
Yeah.
And authors that do that, we are big fans of, doesn't matter. So, Mark, you're a fan of this book too. I know it's not on your list, but
It's one of my favorite all-time horror books of all time.
why is it one of your favorites?
Because you get drawn in. This is not, you feel like this should be a native creature that exists. I mean, he builds the world around this thing that you're like, oh gosh, I need to look up the history of the Croatoa and
See,
find
I
out.
almost got you saying it
Yeah,
right.
almost the Crota. I need to
Crota.
look up the Crota, not Croatoa.
I know it's
But
me. I'm sorry.
I need to look up the Crota. I need to find out the history of this creature. I want to look up the mythology of this creature. He made it up.
I know, and I just don't
And-
want to say.
And it's like,
Look,
it's one of those things. There was some board game, I guess, that did that as a monster, and a couple other things have used it as a monster. And he's like, hey, and they're like, oh no, this is a public domain legend. He's like, no, I created it, and it's that big of a world. It's like Lovecraft creating the Cthulhu mythos. That's that level.
Yeah.
It is that level, and it's freaking scary. I mean, it is.
It is very. I couldn't put it down,
Yeah.
and then I couldn't sleep. So I
Yeah,
had the
there's-
combo of like, I need to understand what happens,
Yeah.
but then I am not able to actually go to bed. So
Yet
thank
another
you,
one.
Owl, going back, because that I had to take many melatonin to get
Yet
to sleep.
another one that screams adaptation,
And
because
it hasn't been
not
adapted yet.
adapted for anything. And you get in the mindset of the monster in a couple of the chapters,
Yes.
which is incredible. It's like reading Hannibal Lecter's notes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's incredible because it is a monster that hunts for the pleasure of
Of
the hunt.
hunting.
And
that's a little different because a lot of these monsters, even a lot of like we talk about Dracula and all these kind of things, they hunt for survival. That's what they're doing. This
is it's the Predator, but way before Predator ever came out and everything, and they all owe allegiance to this. And yes, 100% yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So I would just know if you start reading it, be prepared to do it on a Friday night if you can
Yep.
get to sleep during the day on the weekends.
There is an amazing audio version available as well. So,
so if you're driving, that'll keep you up, truckers out
oh
there.
yeah, believe me, you won't. I really like that one, and he does another one called Evil Whispers, which is my number 4. Evil Whispers involves a family going on vacation. Well, a little bit about Crota before we go. It's a cop investigating a series of strange crimes where the killings are very graphic and very brutal and don't make sense. And that's
which pulled me into, because I love true crime. So it was kind of like that true crime flavor, but then the supernatural added in, which just made it better.
And then Evil Whispers is mine because it's Florida, it's swamp, and there is a voice in the woods talking to a little girl. And it's a family pulls up to the park, and they just have this. Oh man, it's the more I say, the more I'm giving away already.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those, I've got to be careful because you literally will get pulled in page 1. It is one of the best page turners ever. We love you, Al.
Amazing. Amazing.
Happy Halloween, and can't wait to have some of your wife's fry bread again. This
And
is
for the record, that wasn't a shout out to get the fry bread. The books are
although
absolutely number
the
4.
books are number 1, but the fry bread is number 2. Yeah, it's right there on that level. But Evil Whispers is one of those, it draws you in. You can't go wrong with any of Al's books. I mean, Breed is incredible. If you go to St. Augustine, read Breed before you go. If Evil Whispers, if you're doing any sort of road tripping in Florida, which I wrote 3 books about road tripping in Florida, Evil Whispers is my go-to to get in the mood.
Novel
It is to get in the mood. It is Halloween in the swamps, monsters, legends. Again, now this one does have a little bit of real native lore in it, because there's actually a native lore, a character who's being influenced by a native guide, a spirit guide that is guiding them on their way.
Okay, you're about to give away too much.
I'm just saying, just trust me, when you see the cover, it doesn't do it justice. Pick it up. You'll love it. So
absolutely. Okay, so that's number 5 and number 4. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
All right. Eerie, Appalachia. Gear up for a frightful jaunt into the darkest reaches of the ancient Appalachians. Folks deep within the Appalachian hollers lean close to the campfire to share stories of the inexplicable with hushed awe. Monsters rumbling in the hills, strange lights darting through the pitch black night sky, horrible occurrences almost ineffable in their bizarre tragedy. Tall tales, you might say. Tell that to the Flatwoods monster in Braxton County, West Virginia, or the Goat Man of Louisville. Look into his humanoid eyes and let him know you don't believe. And what of those apparitions in Mammoth Cave's Corpse Rock, or the Satan spawn known as the Jersey Devil? How do you respond when confronted by these mysteries? From the metaphysical energy that swirls near Serpent Mound in Ohio to Point Pleasant's Mothman legacy, Mark Muncy and Carrie Schultz explore the dark history lurking in the shadows of Appalachia. Read by Mark Muncy, author and experts on strange folklore with appearances on shows such as Ancient Aliens, The Curse of Robert the Doll, and many, many more.
Destiny Beard, the lyrical soprano who will haunt your dreams. With her alluring melodies and intricate harmonies, this dark siren of wistful song shall capture your soul and lead you into the night. Check out Destiny's new single, The Haunting Is Over, with international musicians Sam Haines and Gary Bennett, as well as her other musical works at destinybeard.com.
We're back.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this has been fun already.
It has been, and I feel like we could talk for hours on books, but we got to be careful.
It's like we used to do we do a podcast with authors.
It's weird. It's like we read books, but I think we should do a couple of honorable mentions.
Yes, yeah,
so
definitely.
I have a couple honorable mentions. One of them, I have to give a shout out to. He's been on our podcast, but he has been a horror writer for many, many years. He writes both adult and young adult horror books. But one of his favorites that I have, because it's circa 1980, and I love it, love it, love it, is Blister by Jeff Strand.
Jeff Strand is incredible. We had him on for our Attack of the Killer Tomatoes episode.
Because he wrote a companion book for that.
Which is fun read, but
he puts out about 2 books a year.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of humorous horror.
Which is my fave.
Yeah. Lots of still graphic, gory, whatever, but his stories are very fun and there's humor to them and things like that. Blister happens to be set in the 1980s, and it is about a comic writer who ends up learning about a woman who lives in like a shed, basically,
right,
who has blisters all over her and is wrapped, and there's folk tales and there's teasing of her and bullying. And that's all I'm going to say, but I love that book. So that is an honorable mention, Mr. Jeff Strand, Blister. And then one other one I want to honorably mention, which is if you like a little bit of romance / erotica in your it's steamy romance. And I'm going to say this because I feel like the first 5 in this now 30-book series, and I have read them all.
Oh my goodness.
Are really, really good stories for as far as horror goes, because it's about a detective who has an ability to raise the dead.
Ooh,
And she uses it to like confirm wills and investigate murders, that sort of
yeah,
thing.
good stuff.
But then she gets tied into the paranormal world that has vampires and werewolves and all sorts of creatures that go into it. But it is the first one, it's the Anita Blake series by Laurel K. Hamilton.
Yep.
And the first one is called Guilty Pleasures.
Yeah.
And the first, I want to say 5 get very into the stories and some folklore around different like paranormal creatures and her investigative. And then it gets into a lot of sex and things like that.
They definitely transform.
They transform. So, and if you're into that, it's great. I don't think they're bad. Laurel King.
No. It's like, I love the Dresden Files, but I do have a tough time getting people into the early books because they're written as noir novels. So Harry is the most hard up guy in the world. So every girl is beautiful to him. But that's how the 1940s noir style that he's kind of imitating.
A Dame walked into my office,
exactly, that kind of thing. So it's tough to get. I can't universally recommend them, but everybody who does get into them loves them. And it's, again, folklore, great history, and then again the plot just gets crazier and crazier as each one goes on. There's a really good one that's all ghosts called Grave Peril, and that's like the 3rd book in the series. It's a good jumping on point, and you miss some of the kind of a little overly misogynistic stuff the first couple books. So again, another series, honorable mention, because we love Jim Butcher and we love the Dresden Files. I can't put them down. They're guilty pleasures.
I agree. And then there's another author, if you like serial killer type books, that I enjoy. He does his mainly in these books, it's a female protagonist, so big fan of that. His name is Mike Omer, and the first one is the Zoe Bentley series. And it's called Killer Mirror. I think Killer Mirror is the first one, but it's the Zoe Bentley, if I'm not saying it correctly, but I'll put the link. Mike Omer, and it is about a girl who a female who works with the FBI. She's not an FBI agent, but she is a criminologist. Like, she can put the pattern of a crime together, but she has a previous experience with a serial killer that was never caught. But the crimes that are occurring are kind of similar to this. Is he back? And that
copycat, is he back? Yeah.
But it's the thing I loved about it, and it's similar to one of the other ones on my list, is that it's done very much like these investigations go. Because some of these books sometimes that I love are written, though, in the fantastical world of what we believe is an FBI investigation versus a lot of times people don't realize the FBI doesn't actually get involved until it crosses state lines, or it's just a big enough deal that there's enough pressure that they have to invite the FBI in. A lot of people think it's a serial killer, the FBI gets involved. No, I mean, there was one that was in Tampa a few years ago where he was shooting people. He was just killing
random around people.
And it turned out he worked at a McDonald's in Ybor City.
Yep.
I've gone to that McDonald's when I've gone clubbing it. Not gonna lie. Maybe he served me burgers, who knows? But he was caught, but he killed 6 people. The FBI was not involved in that. That was the Tampa Police Department and stuff investigating and following the clues and discovering them. So what I like about the Bentleys is it's not, when the FBI gets involved, is because it is cross state lines and they don't really want to be involved. And then of course it does a good job of the machismo that goes with, this is my investigation, and how that can really cock up things. So anyway, those are my honorable mentions. What about a couple more of yours, Mark?
A couple more of my honorable mentions are the wonderful books that Alfred Hitchcock presents. Came out back in the day. He did Alfred Hitchcock Mysteries. He did Alfred Hitchcock. Now, these were not anything by Alfred Hitchcock. He wrote the little intros to them and outros, but these were done by old ghostwriters. And stuff like that back in the day. And they hold up. They're fun little tales. They're quick, easy reads. So highly recommend them.
Very cool.
One of the more recent things, speaking of television, that I just recently got from a Kickstarter is the 50th anniversary retrospective of Rod Serling's Night Gallery.
Oh my gosh, I know how much you love the Night Gallery.
I love the Night Gallery. I love Twilight Zone. Don't get me wrong, Twilight Zone's the king. but Night Gallery does not get enough love. And I think it's actually the superior product and overall. And this actually has some of the original.
Oh my gosh, that book is huge.
It has some of the original art
Oh
from
wow.
the episodes, the actual paintings. But then it's got scripts about every single episode, the reasons behind it, the making ofs, and the stories that they were based on. And
Oh
it's
my gosh.
it's a treasure. And
Yeah,
honestly, I literally just cracked the spine while we were talking here. So I cannot wait to dig into this. Highly recommend you pick it up before it's gone, because it is a Kickstarter print. They are not reprinting this.
Oh wow.
So grab it while you can. And then my last honorable mention, well, we've already talked about Haunting of Hill House. We've talked about Night in the Lonesome October. So those would definitely be up there for me. But the classics, read Dracula, read Frankenstein. They're a classic for a reason. And if you only read one, Dracula is the one that holds up, because it is written as a bunch of diaries, entries, and newspaper clippings and stuff like that, so that you get pulled into the story much easier than Frankenstein, which is very
well,
methodical.
and Mary Shirley's Frankenstein is about the monster.
Yeah.
And that's, everybody calls him Frankenstein. Frankenstein is not the monster.
No. And
Yeah.
and then the other one would be if you're gonna go back, a lot of people love reading Lovecraft this time of year. A lot of people love reading Robert E. Howard this time of year. I would recommend his Solomon Kane stories.
If we're going Lovecraft, I'm gonna go the Midian.
Midian
is my favorite Lovecraft by far, and they made a movie out of it in the 80s, and it actually was really good, called Nightbreed.
Nightbreed, which was Clive Barker's in version of the of H.P. Lovecraft. But the one I would recommend is actually by Chambers, and that is called The King in Yellow. And it is probably Lovecraft adjacent. It's all about Hastur cycle, which is just he's a sub-elder god. He's not Cthulhu, but he's up there. And the King in Yellow, the yellow sign, the fact that True Detective, HBO's True Detective, their first season was hinting at the King in Yellow the whole time, and that's why a lot of us were a little disappointed in the ending of that it didn't go all full in. But it's very, very cool, and it's just an amazing read. So don't ignore the classics, people. Read the classics.
And if a lot of people say Lovecraft, some people might not know what that means. Lovecraft did a lot with the elder gods that are actually parts of history and stuff like that. But the gods that are talked about, and
the forgotten gods,
the darker gods. So Lovecraft is amazing. Okay.
Yeah. It's one of those, it's one of those fun things, and that's what the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game's about. And when you see that little plushy squid-headed thing back, the way Lovecraft wrote it, if you would have found that, like an ancient civilization that worshipped that, it would have driven you crazy, because you've been like, how could something like this exist? Now we look at that and go, oh, let's make a plushie and put it on a car window.
It's got a couple of those.
Yeah, exactly.
So that works out well.
But that's why we love that series. All right, so now my number 3, I'm going to have you read this one opening paragraph
from your
my number 3, and just tell me if this is not Halloween.
Okay. It's called, let's see here.
Just start.
I'm going to start. I got it. Okay. October country, ... That country where it is always turning late in the year. Ooh, that country where the hills are fog and the rivers are mist, where noons go quickly, dusks and twilights linger, and midnights stay. The country composed in the main of cellars, subcellars, coal bins, closets, attics, and pantries faced away from the sun. That country whose people are autumn people, thinking only of autumn thoughts, whose people passing at night on the empty walks sound like rain. Ooh, I got chills. What is this that I'm reading?
You just read October Country, which is Ray Bradbury. It's a collection of just short stories and little vignettes that he didn't develop into full novellas and things like that he had done over the years. And this came out 1999.
Wow.
Of all things, one of his last published projects, and it's incredible. And he talks about the books that inspired him and all this. And of course, he's this is just his. There's so many little stories. There's love story. There's a skeleton fighting his own body. There's,
Wow.
there's a lot of other fun little things. And it's just little things that piqued his interest when he was a kid, and he's bringing them back. He wanted to go back to being that kid, that was exploring October and all that.
I'm going to
And
be one of the October people.
exactly.
I
And
think we are October people. Can we be honorary October people?
Well, I think we're reading Night in the Lonesome October.
So we're
we're part of the October Society. So yeah.
Oh,
So.
get us sued by
No, they'll not get sued by the Amber Foundation.
Okay, let's not.
All right,
do that.
all right.
So
But anyway, so yeah, that's my number 3.
that's your number 3.
What's your number 3?
Okay, it's a classic. Are we ready? By classic, I mean my classic, not your classic. You go old school. Stephen King's It.
Oh, it's a classic.
It is, because a lot of people don't realize what because that and Pet Sematary are two where the new movies, I'm going to say Stephen King's It, terrifying. The new movies, or the original movie that was done, and it wasn't a movie, it was a made-for-TV miniseries, which had just the most amazing cast. But the clowns are terrifying. Clowns are just still terrifying. Shout out to one of my very best friends, Brandy, who I'm going to bring up clowns. She's listening right now, and
I had
touching me in the face.
I was terrified of clowns for years. I had a shirt that said "Can't sleep, clowns will eat me. Can't sleep, clowns will eat me." I had that shirt for years, and everybody gave me grief about it. I was trying to defeat my fear of clowns. Working in the haunt industry and working at Hellview, that got me cured of clowns pretty quick. So
yeah. Well, did you know? Because I know the amazing Carrie, your wife, does spiders, but there's a clown spider.
Yeah.
Yes, that looks like a clown face.
It does.
And so for those afraid of spiders and clowns, you can do that. But Stephen King's It, I feel like, had such an impact for younger, because it's really the story of these younger kids. And then as an adult, I felt like it really shows, and you should read the book, people. Read the book. The movie.
There's one problematic chapter.
There is one problematic chapter, but other than that problematic chapter that involves
don't worry about it.
You'll know it when you
get there.
You can skip that chapter. It has no impact on the story. But it is really interesting. But also for me, it showed a little bit of Stephen King's craziness because of the space and things like that. Which were hinted at in the newer movies. So what I will give mass credit on is the original story was great, except for the ending. I love Tim Curry. I'm a ride or die with Tim Curry all the way. But the monster at the end of that was terrible.
Well, they ran out of budget.
They ran out of budget, and it looked like something you could buy at Party City. So if you get a chance to watch the original, I will say
amazing.
It's amazing, and it's so creepy because these adults have to go back and confront these things that they have ignored
and shoved away,
locked
in the closet of their brain.
One of them takes his own life, and that's what starts this again. So anyway, my shout out is to Stephen King's It. Second to that is Pet Sematary to me, because the Indian folklore in Pet Sematary, which is completely ignored in all the movies, makes that book 10 times more terrifying than the movies. And I will say this, Pet Sematary, not a fan of either one of the movies. I didn't think they did it justice.
I did like Fred Gwynn as
I loved him, but
he was the only thing to say. And then little Gage, I think was
the actors were great. It's not the acting, it's I feel like they missed the story they could have told.
They put in different beats that should have been from the book.
So that's my number 3. What's your number 2, Mark?
My number 2 is from the great Ravenloft book series from Dungeons and Dragons. I love going back to, it was one of my first jobs, so I can't argue that.
No, you can't.
So it hit me on a different level. But it is just one of those books, that series that's very cool. For those of you who don't know, Dungeons and Dragons had built up all these classic villains over the years, and they needed a place for them to grow and stay. So they get locked in a hell of their own making, literally, and that becomes this domain of dread, the land of Ravenloft. And Ravenloft is, each guy has their own little tailor prison for them, but there is one at the heart of it all, the namesake Ravenloft, and it was the guy who was there is the classic epitome of the vampire, Count Strahd von Zarovich. And he has the classic Abraham von Helsing character after him, Rudolf van Richten. And at one point, Van Richten has figured out that Strahd is asleep. He walks right into Castle Ravenloft and nothing attacks him and all this. So he's got a limited window because he's figured out how long the vampire works and all this. But inside he finds his personal journal. And that becomes the book I Strahd by the great P.N. Elrod, who had written a bunch of Vampire Files books and other stuff. And TSR hired them to write this novel. The audio version, the original audio version, I think is far superior to the newer version. The original was read by Roddy McDowall.
Oh,
So it's hard to beat that. Roddy McDowall was a great character. And for those of us who remember Fright Night, the original, he was Peter Vincent. For those of you who like Batman the Animated Series, he was Mad Hatter in a lot of the animated episodes. But he's I remember from Planet of the Apes and of course Twilight Zone and a lot of other things. But his version of I Strahd is, I can listen to that over and over. The book is amazing. And it follows the vampire tropes, but it makes you realize this is an unreliable narrator. It's from his point of view on how he makes a deal with the devil, basically, to stay immortal. And to the fact that that's one of the new edition of Dungeons and Dragons, one of their biggest things was Curse of Strahd. And it's basically, your characters interacting with Strahd 100 years after this book.
yeah.
So, or hundreds of years after this, or maybe thousands, because we don't know how long. So,
Well, and so for those listeners who are like, I don't play role playing, you don't have to play to read these books. You can read the books. They're amazing stories. You don't have to know the backstory.
It's fantasy light. There's not a lot of, there is some magic and stuff, but it's Game of Thrones level magic. So
Yes, yes.
first few seasons of Game of Thrones level magic.
So awesome. Okay, mine.
All right, so yours.
Ready?
Yep.
Is the Red Dragon.
Oh.
So there was movies made. Everybody became very familiar with the Silence of the Lambs.
Yep.
And I learned recently that, did you know Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster did not talk at all?
Yeah, ever
during that filming until the very last day. She was having lunch and he came up and she was like, yeah, I'm terrified of you. And he literally went, I'm terrified of you.
Yeah. It was very, very good.
But I think it helped build that. But a lot of people don't realize it started with a book called Red Dragon.
Yeah.
And it's about the detectives and stuff like that. And it is, because I'm more true crime, we all know that listening to the show.
Yeah.
But what's scary about the way he wrote these books is that these are realistic kind of killers, like serial killers. And I think that humans can be way more terrifying than monsters. Like what humans will do to each other is way more terrifying than what monsters will do.
100%.
And so those are the kind of things that scare me. And they did make Red Dragon into a movie. It is okay. It is.
Yeah, it's not terrible.
No, I mean, I think it was very hard to beat Silence of the Lambs. The second, Silence of the Lambs had Julianne Moore instead of Jodie Foster. And Gary Oldman and stuff. That was well done.
Well done, but again, you're holding a mirror up to
something that
masterpiece. Yeah.
But Red Dragon, that story, sort of origin story of Hannibal Lecter in a way, is because he's one of the most terrifying things, because here's this doctor and all this. So anyway, Red Dragon is my number 2.
Yeah.
So that drum rolls us, Mark. A little drum roll.
All right. So before we go into our number ones,
are we doing another honorable?
I just want to do a couple quick honorable mentions.
Okay.
These are actually nonfictions that I highly recommend. One is called Halloween Nation from the I Skull Halloween collection by Leslie Pratt Ballantyne, and it is basically how do you celebrate Halloween. It's a collection of where it started and how it gone and how it's become what it's become. Even mentions a few great haunts and stuff like that. And then the other fun one she also did was called A Halloween Reader.
Okay.
And this is classic poems, stories, and plays from Halloween's past. So it literally is a collection of old short stories and poems and it's got, of course, some Edgar Allan Poe and some Washington Irving, but it also has some really obscure stuff that I had never read before in here. And it's just fun to flip through a random chapter on a Halloween night, for October. Very, very good. But okay.
Wait, but we should do
Do
a
it.
reminder to listeners because we're coming up. We're going to have our Halloween episode a few episodes from now. But one of the things about this particular year is that, first of all Hallows Eve
Right.
is a druidic pagan type holiday, right? It's not in the Christian Catholic faith.
Yeah. It was a All Saints Day was adopted for this.
Yes, but Halloween was considered a holiday in the fact that it was the day that the veil between the spiritual world and the human world is the thinnest.
Yeah, because the nights are getting their darkest.
They're getting their darkest. And
This is
so
the night between the equinox and the solstice.
in the solstice. And what's interesting about, I already just got goosebumps, everybody. So what's interesting is this year, first of all, this October has been weird as fuck. I'm just gonna say it. Agree with me. This has been a very weird,
This is
stuff happening. There's been great stuff for us, but there's been weird stuff for us happening.
Yep. No.
And some things to, we've had our
And thank you, fans, so much for all the interactions, because you're sharing some stories too.
Yeah.
That we discussed some other things that have kind of built up with that too. So thank you so much for sharing your thing.
Please always share your favorite books with us. We didn't say that yet, but this year is the veil is the thinnest it's ever been.
The oriented meteor shower ends the night before. So we'll still see, some leftovers of that. For those who follow lunar cycles, this is like peak.
There is a lot of weird
Wow.
stuff. So if you're having a weird October, travelers, this is why. So we're buckled up, me and Mark, and we're going to go into our book ones, but we are buckled up for this holiday because it has become, before candy was given out, it was protection and knowing that the spirit realm is right next to us.
Yes.
So for that, Mark, do you want me to go first or you want to go first?
I'll go first with mine.
Okay, what is your one?
Well, we've discussed Haunting of Hill House. We've discussed all these great books in the past. I went a little modern for this one.
What?
So I know.
What? Who are you?
It's not exactly modern because
it's season. I'm just thrown off by this.
It's 20 years old now, but
okay.
It is The House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. I think I pronounced that right. For those of you who know this book, you will discuss this book.
I don't know that
all
book.
Of your friends. This is the greatest modern haunted house book of all time.
How have you not forced me to read this yet, Mark?
Because I only have one copy.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
So I don't loan this one out. Everything. There are little. This is like reading 3 books at once.
Okay.
Because you are reading the book that which was the front line.
It says this is not for you.
Okay. So I'll just read the first paragraph. I still get nightmares. In fact, I get them so often I should be used to them by now. I'm not. No one ever really gets used to nightmares. So this guy buys a book, buys a house, and in the house he finds a book, and it's written by this famous filmmaker, and he bought this house, retired to this big fancy house. This guy's renovating the house, right? And he finds this book hidden in it.
Did they do a movie or a documentary based?
Nothing has ever adapted this.
Wow.
Because, now what happens is so the first bits are his bits, and then but here's from 1997. This is January 5th, isn't there a little bit? Whoever finds and publishes this work shall be entitled to all proceeds. I ask only that my name take its rightful place. Perhaps you will even prosper. If, however, you discover that readers are less than sympathetic and choose to dismiss this enterprise out of hand, then may I suggest you drink plenty of wine and dance in the sheets of your wedding night, for whether you know it or not, Now you truly are prosperous. They say truth stands the test of time. I can think of no greater comfort knowing that this document failed such a test. So that's where he starts getting into the book. And so this is Johnny Truant, who's the guy who finds this.
Okay.
So he is the footnotes on this.
Oh, wow.
The Navison Records is the name of the actual book in the book. And that's written by the producer, right?
Okay.
This film producer. He bought this house, and little things he starts noticing about the house don't quite add up. So one of the things he figures out is there's this long hallway on the house with several windows. It doesn't match up to the outside of the house. So he goes in one window, he goes outside, walks the few steps, comes back in the other window. He's gone twice the distance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No.
So
no.
yeah.
Moving.
And so he makes YouTube videos of this to show that this is real. And now there are more footnotes. Who's writing the other footnotes? We don't know.
Oh, no.
And so the story goes on and on. The writing gets more and more eclectic, and there are pages literally formatted weirdly. When you pick up the book, you're like, what is this? But it makes sense when you read it. And there are groups out there on how to read this properly. Should you read the footnotes first? You read them as you read them. There is no wrong way to read it because it will just suck you in.
Oh, see, now I'm gonna have to order this book right away.
Yeah, you can get that. It's just one of those books. It's an experience.
And it looks like, from looking at it, that the audiobook will not do this justice.
No. Do not get
Okay.
the audiobook. Not. I won't. This is one of the few that I'd be like, nope. And again, I don't know how it would ever see the light of day as a movie.
Oh, yeah, no, that's super.
And the appendices at the end are even weirder. It's just one of those. Just trust me, gang. Pick it up and enjoy the best few hours of your life reading this amazing book, or possibly day or two, because it is a beast.
I'll have to check it out. It definitely looks like one that I need to make sure I have plenty of time to melatonin myself.
Yeah. There's a
whiskey myself, which
there are a few books that have tried to copy it unsuccessfully. Even J.J. Abrams did a fun one called S, which is Ship of Theseus, his take on that. And it's got notes in the sidelines and stuff, but it's not nearly this. This is amazing.
Well, I'll have to check that out. Okay. So my number one comes from an author I found at a convention.
Always fun.
Yeah, he's amazing. But this particular book is one where it is called I Am Not a Serial Killer.
Oh.
By Dan Wells.
Dan, yes.
Shout out Dan, Mr. Wells.
Fantastic.
I love Mr. Wells. But this book, again, and it sounds like I'm going the true crime route, but I'm not. This book is very Lovecraftian.
Yes.
Because it is about a sociopathic teenager who knows that he's a sociopath.
Yep.
So he has these rules for himself so that he interacts well and doesn't kill people, right? His mom runs the town mortuary. He's used to being around dead bodies, but there's something up with his neighbor. And there's a thing that he's seen and that is killing people in the town, right?
Oh, lovely.
And there's some mystery around it, but let's just say this thing is not human. So this is actually the first in a series. And I picked it up at a convention. I just saw the title that says I'm Not a Serial Killer.
Yeah, no.
And I was like, mine.
I think I picked it up for my daughter at one point, and then she's like, Dad, this is great. You need to read this. And so I did. So
yeah, oh my God. And there was actually a movie done. Christopher Lloyd stars in this movie. And I have to say, the book, of course, read the book. Hands down, read the book. But the casting of this movie and with Christopher Lloyd, I'm not going to give it away, but the young man that they got to play the lead character, brilliant. It was brilliantly done. And they did such a great story of telling this story, which is a huge difference. And so shout out to Mr. Wells. I Am Not a Serial Killer. I will be reading it again after The Night in Lonesome October because I absolutely love it. You can check out the movie, check out the audiobook.
It's a great audiobook.
But it is my number one because it is from the mindset of this young man who knows that if he went to the dark side, he would be a serial killer. Like he knows that. So he has rules of interacting with people and what he's supposed to do and how he's supposed to behave and all of these things so that he appears normal in society. So that is my number one.
Yeah. No, like I said, we could have gone on and on and on.
And on
and on and on and on, gang. Literally, we're in my library, and Erika got a taste of it.
Surrounded.
Surrounded by good stuff. One of my favorite audiobooks to listen to is World War Z.
Oh,
by,
I just
Max Brooks,
to that.
which is great because it's Mel Brooks's son, Max Brooks. But because he has Mel Brooks's connections, he was able to get some of the most amazing Hollywood talent to do these little short stories. You talk about your V Wars.
Yeah.
It was Z War, it's basically the zombie war, and it's all these stories.
Z Wars has the same kind of all-star cast that's doing the Z War.
The V Wars. It's great.
V Wars stuff.
No, it's definitely, those are two fantastics. Like I said, there's so many, we could just go on and on, gang. I like reading novelization tie-ins to like Buffy, and I even like some of the old video game tie-ins and stuff like that are horror related. The Resident Evil novels are actually fun reads. One of my favorites was a series, Gabriel Knight series. Jane Anson did. And then one was called Sense of Flowers, very voodoo. Second one was very werewolves. But the third one was called Blood of the Sacred, Blood of the Damned. And it was about the bloodline of Christ and vampires wanting to corrupt it. And later, of course, now Angels and Demons comes out, and Dan Brown's collection. And I'm always like, I wonder if he actually played her video games and read her book, because he's literally talking all her stuff. But she did the same research he did just 10 years before him. But
no, totally.
But well, gang. I mean, you
tell us your favorite books. We want to know your Halloween books.
I want new ones. I want to read new ones. And if you read these, let us know what you think of them, and tell us if these are some of your new favorites and stuff. We'd love to hear that. And of course, you can always reward the worlds.
Yes. Oh my God. I did find Mark a copy that I just gave him
a new
today.
one I didn't have. So I have several copies of that, and and I'm always welcome to more. And buy extra copies of Lonesome October and give them to your friends. That's what we do. And I'd say buy some of these and give extra copies to your friends, because not everybody goes, well, all right, I'll get that later, and then they don't.
Give books. We're big fans of give books,
but books, because book gifts never go away. So gang, with that note, I will say the lights are getting dark. The turning of the year has come.
The veil is getting thin.
The veil is getting very thin, and we will see you on the other side.